Alan, if we just turn our camera off quickly.
Turn it off, yeah?
All right. So, good evening, everybody. How are you? It's Will's webinar, the April edition. Really looking forward to this one. Really looking forward to this one, in fact. So, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I just played around with something, and I'm realizing that it's not working. So, I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to come straight onto this because it's really not working. And then I'll get Alan to turn his camera on in a few minutes. So a few of you joined us already. So hello to Aaron, hello to Nicola, hello to Louise, hello to John, Arnold, Joe, Linda, how are you? We've got Margaret in the house, we've got Jessica, we've got Margot, we've got Ellis, and we've got Pete so far. So and if Mary's sitting there with you as well, hello to Mary. I hope you guys have all had a wonderful day. And are looking forward to this evening. I certainly am. We'll wait a couple of minutes for people to come on. But what I really want us to do is if you guys can just use the Facebook group as the official feed for this. So if you are not in our Facebook group currently, let me just post the link to the Elite Network community. So then any questions that you have, what we do is we keep them on the Elite Network community so that we can refer back to them, because unfortunately what happens when we close this webinar, we lose all of the comments. So I've posted that there. So if you're not part of our Facebook community, the Elite Network community, then join that, and 3,500 other people as it stands at the moment that are in that group. So I'm really looking forward to this particular sorry, I'm moving around screens. Normally I have a number of different screens that I'm looking at. Today I'm having to deal with one. So I'm having to maneuver around a little bit differently to how I normally would. So hello, everybody. If I haven't had the pleasure of knowing you personally already and we haven't connected, my name is Will Polston. I'm the founder of Make It Happen and the Elite Network. Make It Happen is peak performance coaching business, and one of the things that I'm incredibly passionate about is empowering people to unlock their full potential and make it happen. Throughout my lifetime, my goal is to empower 1 billion people to unlock their full potential, and we've got a number of different ways that we do that. One of my big values is collaboration. I believe in collaboration over competition. I've got this massive purpose, this massive drive, this massive mission, and what I love doing is connecting with like-minded people, which I have the pleasure of doing at the Elite Network, and obviously we've got 7 locations now around the UK, and obviously connection with the speakers, and one of the speakers that I'm desperate to get at the Elite Network, but we haven't been able to do it just yet, but we have been able to get him roped into doing a webinar this evening, is Allan Kleynhans. So I just want to make sure that, Alan, when I pronounce your surname, I do pronounce it correctly, don't I? Kleynhans, is that right?
Should I put this camera on?
Yeah, put it on.
All right, good evening, Will. Thanks for having me, buddy. Yeah, Kleynhans. I always say to people in England, usually, who battle to say it, because it's Dutch, actually. And I say to people, if you can say Calvin Klein, then you can say Kleynhans. You know? It's just a Y instead of an I, really, but it's the same thing. In South Africa, we say Kleynhans, but to make it easier for people here, I always say, say Calvin Kleynhans, you know?
Fantastic. Okay, so we now know, and I know now how to say it correctly as well. So that's all good. So first of all, I just want to say a huge thank you for joining us on this evening. I know we were having a chat on Sunday on the phone, and I truly have for the last few years really looked up to you from when I very first met you, and in fact when I very first saw you speaking at a Success Resources event, and following your journey and connecting. So to be able to have you on this call and on this webinar this evening is an absolute honor, a privilege, and I'm truly grateful. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Thanks, man. That's very kind of you to say that. Thank you, my friend. It's great to be here with you, and great to be here with whoever's on the call with us. It's going to be fun, I think.
It certainly is. So for the purposes of people that have just seen me posting about you on social media who maybe don't know too much about you, do you want to just let them know a little bit about who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, predominantly I speak. So I spend most of my time speaking. I speak 2 or 3 times every week at least. and I speak all around the world really, and I run workshops. I'm a facilitator, training facilitator. I run corporate workshops as well as public workshops. I also coach, but I only coach a very small group of people, a handful of people at one time, because it just takes up so much time. But most of my time is spent on a stage speaking or running a workshop in some, in other corporate environment or a public environment. And I've been doing that for 18 years. And I can't believe it's been 18 years actually. Actually, I was just thinking about it. And when I was recently on the stage telling my story, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's 30 years since I read Think and Grow Rich.
Wow.
In July this year, it'll be 30 years since I read Think and Grow Rich. And I can't believe how fast it's gone,
And Think and Grow Rich been a book that's had a big impact on you?
Yeah, when I first read it, it blew me away really. When I first read it, I was 21 years of age, and I'd never read any. Well, I had read something before that. I'd read How to Win Friends and Influence People because my father had told me to when I was 16, but I never really took it in properly, because I suppose I just read it because he told me to read it. I read it again thereafter, but the first book that I read, open-mindedly and consciously, and really where I paid attention to what I was reading, it was Think and Grow Rich, and it blew me away. And I was 21 years of age, and it came at the right time for me. And I think I've read it many times since, and I've got 4 or 5 copies of that particular book. And it's such a great book. I mean, it's still selling copies, isn't it, today? It's still being re-edited and republished, etc. And it's nobody really knows how many copies it sold. I think conservatively people say 100 million copies, but I think it's probably over 150 million copies since 1937 when it was first published. And it's a fantastic book, and I always recommend people read it. And a lot of people these days, the younger generation, it's an older book, so a lot of the younger generation haven't read it yet, and I still recommend it. It's still one of the best books ever written, definitely.
I would agree with you. So what I want to do, just before we get going, just to make sure everybody's clear. So we have an official thread in the Elite Network community that we're going to be using as the questions thread. So
on Facebook, right?
It is on Facebook in the Elite Network community. So I'm going to monitor it. So if you guys see me sitting down looking at my phone, it's I'm monitoring what you guys are saying. But if you could just do us all a favor, if you could all just comment on the Elite Network community official thread for this evening, just so we know that we can hear you okay and that everything's working there. So then that way we've got so then we know that we're working basically. So if we know that we're hearing, so Aaron can hear us, Joe can hear us, which is fantastic. If the rest of you can just let us know that you can hear us okay. And obviously remember, don't use the chat box on Demio. Make sure you are using the one in the Elite Network community, because then as questions come up about Allan's journey and the conversation that we're going to be having tonight, speaking about how to learn your
learn how you train your ego.
All right, cool. So that's what we come on here to speak about this evening, Allan. So learning to train your ego. So do you want to just sort of explain a little bit about what it is that you mean on that side of things?
Yeah, sure. Well, I always tell people that they've got access to 3 minds, and I always ask people where they think their mind is, and a lot of people point to their head. I've asked this to audiences for 18 years. Where's your mind? Please point to your mind. Everyone points to their head, and I always say to people, this is your head. Inside your head is your brain, but the mind is everywhere. The mind is everywhere, and we have access to the mind. We plug into the mind, and we have access to 3 minds. So we've got the conscious mind, which is what we use to do conscious tasks. To send text messages. Post Facebook posts. Put pictures on Instagram, etc., make phone calls. And then we've got the unconscious mind that is actually our partner in success. Unfortunately, our unconscious mind can't serve us in the way that it's designed to serve us, because the conscious mind is being trained to be critical since our birth. So since we arrived, on earth in this form, human form, and then from the moment we start using language, from the moment we start to process language, we start being trained to be critical by our environment. Our parents are projecting their own fears onto us. They're telling us what we should do and what we shouldn't do. We learn to behave in certain ways in order to get love and acceptance. And then what we do is we start, we train to become critical by nurture. But naturally and by nature, the conscious mind is creative. because we use our imagination, but we don't use it effectively because we never get trained to use it effectively. No one teaches people how to do this when they're young. We should be teaching kids to do this. So by nature, it's creative. By nurture, it becomes critical. Then the unconscious mind can't serve us effectively in the way that it's designed to, because it's actually our partner in success. And whatever you tell your unconscious mind to do, whatever you ask it to do, whatever you ask it to focus on, it will focus on. And then we have access to the super conscious, which is our connection. The way I design, or the way I describe it to people, is our connection to everything around us, which is our ability to use vibration and our ability to use thought in the right way. Most people don't realize that their thoughts and beliefs are not their own. I always say to people, most of what you believe is not your own, because it was installed into your mind from the earliest age. And up until the age of 7, prior to the age of 7, actually, you can't actually process information effectively, and you can't use your reasoning process of your brain. So all you're doing for the first 6-7 years of your life is you're learning by association. And in that first 7 years of your life is where people don't understand, is what's happening in the first 7 years of your life is you're actually laying the foundation of your psychology, which will become the foundation for the rest of your life. And that's why it's so hard for people to change their behaviors or to change the way they think, because those foundations are very deeply laid in the earliest years of their life. And if you add to that, if you've had trauma or a lot of painful experiences in your early years, and then what happens is that will help that foundation to set a lot deeper. So what happens is when people become adults, what they find is now their mind has become a critical process where they criticize everything around them and they judge everything around them and they're evaluating everything. And it's actually quite impossible to look at anything without evaluating it. It takes a lot of training. And so that's why a lot of people, when they come to personal development, or when they try things like affirmations, or they try, being grateful in the morning, or they try journaling, or they try doing any of these disciplines, they find they don't stick with it. They won't stick with it because it takes real practice, and it takes daily practice, and it's something that it takes a long, long time to actually get the master to master. So because the ego mind is so strongly rooted, and its desire and its job is to be right, and its job also is to want to keep you comfortable, and it's designed to protect you, because from the earliest time you want to avoid any kind of pain. As soon as we have any kind of painful experiences when we're young, or any traumatic experiences when we're young, any what we call SEE, significant emotional events in psychology, it's a significant event. It's emotional. You might have forgot the details about it, but you won't forget how it makes you feel, because anything that's related to that in the future, or anything that you walk into that resembles that going forward, will bring up those emotions again very quickly, brings up that feeling again very quickly, even though you don't remember the details of what initially started that when you were younger. So the ego mind is very, very strong, and what it does is it separates people from everything, and the illusion is that we're separate, and so therefore we judge everything, because we've learned to judge ourselves, because we've learned this in our early years of our life. And this is the greatest challenge that prevents people from being successful and happy, is when you can start practicing not judging everything, or not judging yourself. Essentially, that's the first place to start. I always tell people, if you just stop judging yourself, and you can make a daily practice of that, and you can make a daily practice of being conscious. First, you have to become conscious. You have to be aware. You must be aware of what you're doing. But when you start listening, you start hearing a voice in your mind. You'll start hearing a critical voice, and you might hear more than one voice. Sometimes you hear your mother's voice, or it might be your father's voice. I remember I did a talk recently in Jordan, in Amman, and there was 85% of the room was women. And there was about 350 people there. And a young lady stood up after I explained this whole process. And I explained how you form your paradigm in the early years of your life. And she stood up and she said, "Oh my gosh," she said, "I've just realized that my grandmother has been in my head for 19 years, telling me what I can't do, what I shouldn't do, what I'm not allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do because I'm a woman, because I'm a girl." And she said, "I've never really realized who it was. And now I recognize it's my grandmother's voice." And she was always very domineering and she was like the main person in the family, and she would always be telling the grandchildren what they couldn't do, what they weren't allowed to do. And she said, "I've been carrying her for 19 years, and she's been dead for 19 years. And that woman, that same young lady, has stayed in touch with me ever since. And she's done amazing things in her life, because she suddenly she gave herself the permission to let go of that voice, to not listen to it when it spoke. And she says she still hears it sometimes. She still hears that voice. But I gave her a trick. I just said, "Listen, when you hear the voice, just remember, just say to yourself, thank you for sharing. I understand why what you're doing. It's about protection, because that's what the ego does. It wants to protect, because the ego thinks that it's in danger all the time. and it always wants to know what's around the next corner and wants to be right all the time. And that's why you can have two people who are in a relationship, who are in love for 50 years, they've been together, they love each other, they know how to finish each other's sentences, and yet if they have a difference of opinion, because they each have an ego, they will, two people who love each other and respect each other, and you see this happening on Facebook all the time with people who know each other, and what goes out the window is love and respect, and because two egos want to be right. And that's how powerful the ego is. So for the longest time, I've been reminding people, listen, you know what, your mind is so clever because it's so well practiced and it's so well rehearsed. And what we are so good at, people are so good at judging themselves and giving themselves a hard time. And that's why they judge everything they see. But the problem is that you can't be successful if you're judging something. You can't be happy if you're judging something. You can't be in love if you're judging someone. You can either love someone or you can be making them wrong. But you can't do both, So that's the first place. That's why personal development is so powerful, I think, because, well, especially for me over the last 30 years, I think the most important thing that I've learned is that self-love, self-respect and just self-forgiveness and letting myself off the hook, practicing that over and over and over and staying conscious and listening to myself. I listen to myself all the time. I'm talking to myself all the time. I spend the first half an hour of the day talking out loud to myself every morning. I've done that for 18 years. So, and I listen. And when you hear people, when you listen to people, and yourself, being in this game as a coach, when you hear people talk, it doesn't take too long to hear, what they say and what they believe about themselves. It's so evident, And so I think that's the first place that people should always pay attention to, is pay attention to what you're saying as soon as you wake up in the morning. What do you say to yourself all day long? And then when you notice that, when you become aware of that, don't give yourself a hard time about that. Just say, how fascinating. There's that voice again. I wonder whose voice that is. Is that my voice? Is it my mother's voice? Is it my grandfather's voice? Is it my brother's voice? And sometimes people don't recognize the voice. They can't really put a name on it, but it's an amalgamation of voices. It could be the siblings. It could be the two parents, the grandparents. It could be an amalgamation of voices that over time is familiar, but you can't quite place whose voice it is, but it's there and it's been there for long. So it's familiar. And people just think it's normal, right? And it is normal, but you can train it out of yourself. You can pay attention. And I think the people who are the most present, and that's what mindfulness is all about. Mindfulness has become very popular in the last 10 years, and that's what it's about. It's about being present. And you can only be present with someone when you're not in your head. People are in their head all day long, and you can see it on their faces. You can see when people are on their face. You can see when they're in their head. You can see when they're worrying about something. They wear their emotions on their face. And, being present is so important, and to be present with yourself, just to be present to what you're thinking, being present to what you're feeling. And, and that's a very good barometer. That's the most powerful barometer. How do I feel right now? If you're not feeling good right now, then it's a very good chance that you are talking to yourself about something that's not making you happy. You're talking to yourself about something that you don't think you're doing well enough, or you're telling yourself maybe you haven't done something effectively enough, or you're pulling yourself down. Because the barometer, your feeling is the most powerful barometer in your body, and then it gives you a very good indication of what's going on in your head. And I always tell people, I say, well, how do you feel? And they say, I feel fine. I say, no, really check in with your body. How do you feel? How do you feel right now? Sorry, I've just realized I'm looking down at Will's face. I'm not looking at the camera. But I say to them, how do you feel? Check in with your body. How do you feel? And then when people pay attention, they say, oh my gosh, I've actually got a bit of a neck ache. I've got a backache. I've got pain in my shoulder. I've got a headache. I've got pain in my leg. And I say, well, and then that comes from just not managing the mind effectively. And then the mind is always looking to be right and to make sure that what's coming around the next corner, and judging every situation. But you can't go through life like that. You got to get out of your head. And we've got so many things that are contributing to that will. We've got phones, email, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. There's just so much. And then we got on top of that, we got people are telling us meditate, do affirmations, be grateful in the morning, do journaling, go to workshops, and we do personal development. And then people don't take time to just relax, empty the mind, get out of their head, get into a heart, practice feeling love, practice feeling grateful. Gratitude is not something you just do in the morning. You write down 10 things you're grateful for. You got to feel it. If you don't, I know so many people who do gratitude every morning, but when you see them, it's obvious that they're not actually feeling it because they're so stressed. And if you feel that, if you take time to feel it, you can develop that emotion over time. You can develop that feeling until actually that's your vibration, your default vibration. It becomes your default vibration. And then you can see when someone's, feeling good about life. You can see when they're feeling present in their body. You can see when they're present with other people, because it's obvious. They're not in their head.
I would 100% agree with you. I think for me, one of the biggest things over the last few years for me, I mean, you mentioned about being present and becoming more present. And for me, I think that's been one of the most powerful things, because it is very easy, like you say, with email, with phones, with social media, with all of these things, is to be able to go and do more. I want to do more and do more and do more. Whereas the fact is, we're human beings, not human doings, right? So
Yes.
be able to be and get into that place, I think it's really, really powerful. So you said something that was really quite interesting, which you said that the ego is there to protect.
Yeah.
The ego is there to protect, and you spoke about the three different minds. So the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and the superconscious mind. So what part of the mind, of the three minds, is the ego as far as you're concerned?
Well, the ego is a bit of all of it, because the ego, if we learn how to train the ego effectively, then what happens? The ego becomes a very good ally for ourselves. But if we don't train the ego, and then the ego runs its own show, then what happens is the ego very quickly is, it takes over, and then it's just out of control, and then you don't have any peace. And the ego's, as I said, the ego is trying to protect us, because what the ego wants to do, it doesn't want any kind of pain. It doesn't want any kind of discomfort. So that's okay. The ego's role is to protect. However, you've got to turn your ego into an ally. You've got to turn your mind into an ally. And I've heard this often before, and some people on this call may have heard this before, but when you talk about the superconscious, and you talk about, the spiritual being that we are, because I believe that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. I'm by no means religious. I went to 2 Catholic schools, and I went to Sunday school, but I gave up on religion many, many years ago, and I don't believe in religion. But I do believe in energy, and I do believe in vibration. And the universe is a vibrational universe. Everything is vibrating. So when you take us as spiritual entities that are now having this human experience, we've got access to this amazing field of vibration, and it's vibrating all the time, and we are part of that field. We are in that field. That field is in us, and we in that. And so what we do is we can't use that effectively. We can't use the field of vibration effectively, or our ability to manifest effectively, if the ego is out of control and continually telling us or convincing us that we are separate from everything, or that we're separate from other people, or that we don't deserve to be successful, that we don't deserve to be happy. And that's what we learn over a period of time, through these experiences with our parents when we're younger, through our older siblings, or anybody that we look up to, or anybody that has, in some way, shape, or form, that we've had some kind of interaction with that has caused us pain. We've had a heartbreak or something, or somebody's left us, or something's happened, or you've had, an experience in business where maybe you've lost a lot of money. That's a painful experience, but that kind of thing, the residue of that, it stores in your cell. Every painful trauma is stored in your cells. So we've got to remember that there's so much going on all the time, and our job is just to be present in the moment. And remember, the only moment you have right now is this moment now, and the only thought that is real is love. That's the only truth. And remember that your mind is always going to convince you all the time that it's not safe, or that there's something coming, or that you got to be careful, that you need to accumulate some kind of wealth, or you need to do something in order to be accepted, or over there is much better than over here, or something like that, because most people find it very difficult to be present, because the ego's out of control.
Yeah. So one of the things, or a couple of things that you mentioned here, so I'm making a couple of notes that I think will be useful. And guys, if you do have any questions, by the way, again, post them in the Elite Network community, and obviously I'll get round. We might not be able to answer all of the questions, but we'll try and get round to answering as many as we can in the time that we've got. So one of the things that you mentioned was about significant emotional events. Now, I know personally I've had a couple of significant emotional events that have particularly impacted me, and to be honest with you, a number of which are not only the drivers and the reason why I do what I do, but even throughout that journey have continued to evolve and give me even more purpose as to why I do what I do, and bring different levels of perspective for me.
Yes.
Now, I know that you went through your own challenges of giving you your own experience on that, your own significant emotional events that have led you to sort of do some of the work that you do now. So I'm intrigued to know, you mentioned about significant emotional events and the traumas that's within ourselves. So if there's people that are watching this right now, or maybe watching it on the recording, and they've had or going through significant emotional events? What's your advice to them in order to be able to deal with that?
The first thing I'd like to say is that everything's always on the way. Nothing is in the way. It's one of my favorite phrases. And what that means is that nothing is in the way in terms of stopping you feeling happy and fulfilled. And everything that happens is on the way. So we obviously, all of us are going to have trauma in our lives. All of us are going to have challenges. It's part of life. Pain is part of life. You can't get away from pain. Pain is about learning. Pain is about, developing strength and understanding and wisdom, etc. When you go through these experiences. However, a lot of people get stuck and they end up suffering. And suffering is a choice. And what they do is they get stuck on the wrong side of their trauma without realizing that that traumatic experience is actually a gift in itself. And so I tell people that nothing is in the way, everything's on the way. In other words, everything is on the way to a greater experience of life. And we've got to be able to look at those traumatic experiences and ask ourselves much better questions. The way to take control of the conscious mind or the ego mind when it's out of control is to ask better questions. I was listening to Byron Katie this morning. Every morning I've got a habit now for 18 years. Is the first thing I do in the morning is I put something on and I listen to it, and then I have this morning ritual. And part of my morning ritual is listening to something. And I was listening to Byron Katie this morning. I'm not sure. I think you're probably aware of her work. She does something called The Work, and she's got these 4 questions, which is, the first one is it true? So whenever we have a thought, you've got to ask a better question. So when we have a traumatic experience and you've come through all that experience, then it's about asking good questions about that experience. And, I was a soldier in Africa, and I served in Angola. And before that even happened, I grew up, in one of the toughest neighborhoods in South Africa. I grew up right next door to a police station for the first 6 years of my life. I saw some brutal things in the police yard next door when I was 5 years of age. And by the time I was 19, I'd already seen in my fair share of death. And then that was before I even arrived in Angola at the age of 20. I was on an operation for 7 months. One of my mates literally died in my arms while I gave him a blood transfusion. He had the back of his head taken out. And by some shrapnel, we ran into 4 Russian tanks. They took us out. It was a hectic time, 7 months, and I had to do I had to do things that I obviously wasn't proud of for a while, using a patrol mortar and an RPG-7 rocket launcher. And when I came back from that, I locked myself away for 6 months, and I drank myself into the bottom of a bottle every day. And I had nightmares for 7 years. I had post-traumatic stress for 9 years, and that's actually what led me to personal development. But for a long time, I was asking the wrong questions. Because I used to say, why me? Why did this happen to me? And I would curse God and I'd curse life. And, I hated the person I saw in the mirror. I was, suicidal. I was depressed for years. I was, having mood swings. I was very angry. My default emotion was anger for a long time. And when I got drunk, I was getting to fight. So I just stayed away from people. And then until I started asking the right questions, then everything changed, And it took a while. Obviously, it didn't change overnight. But I had some experiences as we do in life. We have some moments where we have like an awakening, we have an enlightening moment. But I started asking different questions, and the questions, whenever I felt those emotions, I used to just ask myself, whose thought is this? Is it my thought, or is it just a random thought? Is this belief true? How can I look at this experience in a different way? Is there a gift in this experience? And I remember reading Think and Grow Rich 6 months after I got out of the army. And when I read in that book, it said, in Napoleon Hill's book, it says, every adversity has within it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. And the first time I read that sentence, my brain said, bullshit, that's not true. How can Angola be beneficial? How can going to war be beneficial? But I wrote that sentence down and I put it on my wall, and I remember I contemplated it for ages. And now, 30 years later, I can put my hand on my heart with absolute conviction. And I've worked with people now in the last 30 years. I've worked with ex-military personnel. I've worked with ex-police personnel in South Africa. I've worked with people in South Africa who have watched their children get murdered right in front of them. I've worked with women who have watched their children get raped. And I've worked with women who have been raped multiple times. I've worked with all kinds of people, children on crack, I've worked with amazing people. And when you help people to understand that, that they are not that experience, that they can actually reframe that experience, and they can look at that experience as a stepping stone to a higher consciousness, to a higher understanding, a deeper sense of wisdom, that there's a spiritual element to the whole thing. It takes some people a lot longer than others to get to that point, but it's possible. It's always possible, because it's all on the way. It's always on the way. There's nothing in the way. And when we get stuck and we believe that something is in the way of our happiness, that's when we suffer. Because now, essentially, what we're doing is we're focusing on something we've lost, or we're focusing on something that we believe has been taken away from us, or we focus on something that we believe we'll never have again. It's like Tony says, those are the things that cause suffering, and it's true. It's anytime we think that we have had something that's happened to us that we can't change, that we have no power to change, we suffer. But we always have the power to change something by the way we reframe it, or the way we describe it, or the way we talk to ourselves about it. Because we're talking to ourselves all day long. So the ego, as I said, when it's out of control, it's always going to look at an experience like that and make it wrong, because it's going to look to blame other people. It's going to look for the perpetrator. It's going to look for the person who caused that pain, and then it gets to be right. Because the ego loves being right. Always, people love to be right, and you see this happening all over Facebook. You've got people who know each other very well. They're very intelligent. They get into a debate about some kind of subject, and next minute they're dissing each other. They're swearing at each other online. You know what I mean? And it's crazy, because that's how powerful the ego is. It's crazy.
So in terms of becoming good, so you said about being able to feel good and raise your vibration and get you to a position whereby if you consistently do it and you condition yourself, then that becomes your default vibration. What are some of the things that you advise people to do to raise their vibration? Because we've all been there, we've had the days where we wake up and we feel incredible and we could take over the world and we could run through brick walls. And if we could create and get ourselves into that position where every single day we felt like that as default, then that would be a really, really great way to live life. So how is that something? What are the things that you do to put yourself in the position to enable that to do? Because your personal development journey spanned nearly 30 years.
Yeah.
Well, was it this month or last month you said that you read Think and Grow Rich?
July. It will be July this year. 30 years. I read that book.
Right.
Time. July.
30 years. So what are the things
that
you typically do to raise your vibration to sort of put you in the best position of feeling good every day? Hello?
I'm thankful for the day ahead, and
I don't know what's happened there.
then what I'll do is I will put on a guided visualization or a guided meditation, and I'll listen to that. And then when that's over, then I'll put on some music, and I have these 3 songs that I will sing with the music, because it's heart opening music. It's chanting, and I love chanting because it's a way of creating vibration in the body, because you're using the voice, and it's heart opening music, so it's very powerful. But for the longest time, to answer that question, for the longest time, I'm present to the fact that I'm a spiritual being. I'm a spiritual being that's having a human experience, and I always remind myself of that regularly. And what that means is that I've developed the belief and the conviction over time that I am love. And so I'll tell you a little story quickly. When I went to
interrupt, Alan, sorry to interrupt very quickly. Yeah. I don't know if this is happening for anyone else, but it's saying no video available. There you're back. You're back.
Okay.
Happening for anybody else, but it seemed it wasn't there.
Okay. But you can hear me still, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. So I'll tell you a story. So in 99, I was in Hawaii, and I attended Life Mastery with Tony Robbins. It was 9 days, and it was an amazing experience. And just 3 months before that, I had done my first UPW in Cardiff, Wales. I had an intervention with Tony in front of 1,500 people. It was extremely powerful. And then 3 months later, I was in Hawaii, and then I ended up on the stage again with Tony. And then a guy came to me afterwards, and he said to me, and I'd just been on the stage telling people about what happened to me the night before. And what happened to me the night before was just an incredible experience, but I have a spiritual experience. And it was an experience that it's very difficult to describe it, but it was an enlightening experience. And my consciousness expanded the night before, and I had this interaction with a turtle, and it was just incredible. And so the next day I got on the stage, and I shared this experience from the stage, and It was beautiful. And this man came up to me afterwards and he said, listen, have you heard of Neil Donald Walsh? So I said, no. So he said, well, I have a message for you that you must read Neil Donald Walsh. So I said, thank you. And I thought to myself, well, a message from who? But I just understood that, I understand about synchronicity, and I understand, I think everything's connected. I don't think there are any accidents. I don't believe in accidents. I think everything happens perfectly at the perfect time. And so I think, thank you for the message, and I will look him up. And then on the way home, I was in a magazine store looking for a motorcycle magazine, and I see these 3 books: Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God, book 1, book 2, book 3. And in a magazine store, no other books. These are the only 3 books amongst all these magazines. So I looked around and I thought somebody's winding me up. And I thought, well, those are obviously for me. And so that's when I started reading Neil. Neil's my favorite author. And in 30 years, I can't tell you how many books I've read, but I've read, I don't know, I would say thousands. I'm a huge reader. I'm always reading 6 books at a time. I've got 20 books right here standing on this desk here and in the corner here. And so I love to read. And so he's my favorite author. And it was when I read that book, book 1, Conversation with God. If any of the guys who are listening here, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's got nothing to do with religion, but it'll be very personal to you. Every individual takes their own personal experience from that book. And so I read that book and it blew my mind. And I remember when I started reading it, and at the time I was working at Citibank, and I used to ride a motorcycle from my home to Citibank, and I actually stopped riding and I started catching a train just so I could read on the way to work, on the way home. And I read all 3 of the books. I read the trilogy, and I read some of the other books that he'd written. And yeah, he's just released recently book 4, which I have right on my desk here. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it was exactly what I was waiting for. When I read that book, I thought, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for all my life. Just a dialogue or an idea of what it is to be a human on this earth. And so to answer your question about how do I put myself in that vibration, I've been practicing for 18 years. And when I came back from that program, I developed a new identity for myself. I began to identify myself as love in my head all day long, all the time. From the moment I opened my eyes to the moment I went to sleep, I got into like a habit of just reciting it over and over in my head. I am love. I am love. I am love. I am loving. I am lovable. I am love. I am love. I am love. And I just said it over and over and over. And eventually, when I started meeting people at networking events, especially if it was in the right environment, like at the Yes Group or things like that, and people said, I would introduce myself as love. I'd say, hi, my name is Love. Or hi, I'm Love, and then people would laugh, and it would break the ice and that. And then they'd ask me, and inevitably people started asking me about that. They said, what do you mean by that? And I'd say, well, I've taken to identifying myself as love, because I believe that we are love at our essence. And I believe that that's the most powerful emotion that we are. And I think, love is the answer to everything. It's the only truth, So if we can put ourselves in that frame of mind on a regular basis and get that in your body and train yourself to feel love. And to give you, and then to tell you another little story. The other night, I was lying with my daughter, and I was lying in bed, and I just started thinking about my daughter. She was lying in another room, and they come to see me every fortnight because they live with their mother in Barnes, and I live out here near Oxford. So they were with me a couple of weeks ago, and they're back here again now. But I was lying in my bedroom, and I started thinking about my daughter, and I just became so overwhelmed with how much love, because we had just been looking at some photographs actually that I brought back from South Africa 2 years ago when my mother passed away. We pulled them out of the cupboard. We started looking at these photographs. I hadn't seen a lot of them. My daughter hadn't seen any of these photos when she was a baby. And I suppose it was part of it was probably a combination of the nostalgia. And then I started thinking of my daughter. And I just suddenly became overwhelmed with how much love I had for her, And so I began to cry. And I thought, oh, my God. And I just felt this overwhelming love. And I thought, you know what? I've got to get up and I've got to go tell her. Because I could have just lay there and felt it and then gone to sleep, right? But I thought, you know what? I'm going to get up and I'm going to go express it to her. And straight away, my ego mindset started thinking, oh, what happens if she thinks you're weird? You know what I mean? What happens? Because now she's 13. So, and I just thought, no, I'm going to go do it. So I went and lay down next to her, and I just said, listen, you popped into my head. I was just thinking about you. And I suppose it's looking at those photographs when you were a baby and thinking about our life in South Africa and how much has changed. And now you're 13 already. I said, I just wanted to tell you, I'm overwhelmed with how much love I have for you and how much I really, how proud I am of you. And I just want to tell you how much I love you. And I was crying when I was telling her this, and she just, she looked at me and she said, thank you so much, Dad. And we embraced. And It was such a beautiful feeling. And I remember when, as I walked back to my bedroom and I lay back in my bed again, I remember thinking, 20 years ago, that would have been alien to me. I wouldn't be able to feel that. I just wouldn't have. I had no ability to feel that, because I was just in my head all the time, and I was so judgmental of myself, of life. I was studying. Obviously, I was in personal development, but at the same time, I was trying to practice these things I was learning. And I was, a lot had changed. Landmark had helped me a lot, and when I eventually went to Tony, I had these massive jumps. But 20 years ago, before I did Tony, I was still battling my own demons, and I would never have been able to experience that with anyone. And just to hug people would have been alien for me, and to walk into a room, I would have always been self-conscious. I would have been in my head. My ego mind would have been going crazy. Why are they looking at me? What do they think about me? All that kind of stuff. But it's through daily practice, I think, just practice feeling the important emotions, really feeling grateful. Don't just write the things down you're grateful for. As you write it down, ask yourself why you're grateful for that particular thing, and then really feel it. Just feel it, get it in your body, and strengthen that feeling over time. Practice feeling that. When you feel love, just really feel love. When you hug somebody you love, hug them for 20 seconds. I know whenever I hug people that I love, I hug them for long, and then they want to. Then you can feel when they want to let go and they want to tap your back. Then I say, listen, just a little bit longer. Don't let go yet. Don't let go. Give me 2 arms. When someone hugs me with 1 arm, I say, give me 2 arms, right? And I held them for a little bit longer. And while I'm holding them, I'm sending love to them. I'm imagining loving them. So it's one of the most powerful. It is the most powerful emotion on the planet, love, without that. But we don't have, because we are so busy and we are so in our heads, we don't give ourselves enough time to experience it fully and deeply. We have moments of it. We have moments of it. We might find ourselves in bed with our lover or with our spouse or with our partner, and we make love. But we have 5-10 minutes of that, and then we go to sleep, and then it's up the next day, we're back to work. So it's about prolonging those emotions that really make the difference. Love, gratitude, connecting with your higher power, remembering that you're a spiritual being and that your essence is love. Just feeling it, whenever you can, as much as you can. And emotion is who we are. We're emotional beings. But I see that so many people don't give themselves the permission to really feel emotion, which is why people love going to Tony, especially if they have that in them. They go to a Tony Robbins event, and now suddenly they've got permission to actually express themselves in the way they haven't expressed themselves since they were 5 years of age or 4 years of age. And you see this person come out you've never seen before, So it's giving yourself permission to really feel that stuff deeply, because I think that's the most beautiful thing you can give yourself and another person, is the ability to really feel.
I would 100% agree with you. It's interesting. So my growing up for me was very much about suppressing my emotions, and I think I know where it stemmed from. I remember actually my grandmother, she passed away, and I was like, I'm not even going to get upset about it because I don't want to get upset. I was just so, as Tony says, literally this thing wrapped around me. You'll know exactly what that is, Alan. And like
Tony, too.
Yeah, exactly. So Tony's had a massive impact on my life, and I know he's had a massive impact on your life, and obviously millions of people's lives now, and no doubt some people here as well, but particularly for me, and I think one of the things that stands out is I've always been a thinker. I still think I'm a thinker. I like to think. I like to change thoughts. I'm very passionate about changing thinking and changing people's paradigms, changing my own paradigms. But one of the big things that Tony often talks about is if you're in your head, you're dead, right? And I would definitely agree with that. And over the years, I've conditioned myself to feel more. I cry more than I've ever cried now, but not necessarily bad cries, like happy cries, like really emotionally happy and cry in ways I never did that before. And I would definitely agree that being able to feel is a big part of that. It's interesting as well that you're saying you took on the identity of I am love, and just by constantly saying it to yourself, using it as an incantation, embodying it, and sort of taking that on was the thing that continually doing that enabled you to have that belief to the point where you would meet people and say, "Hi, nice to meet you. I am love." I think that's absolutely brilliant.
Will, it's and over the years that I've been doing that, it's really now, when I just love people, and I never had that before, and I do. It's a genuine love. I just genuinely feel love for people when I meet people, because for me, along with that is the belief that, we are one. There's just one of us in the room at any time. Like Neil Donald Walsh says in his book, Conversation with God, there's just one of us in the room at any time, because we are the same energy and we are not separate as the ego would have us believe. There's just one of us because we're extending from the same source. So that belief coupled with the identity I'm love, just really makes, it's helped me to be, I'm far less judgmental. Now, it doesn't make me a saint, obviously, because the egos and the conscious mind and the critic that lives in the head is never goes to sleep. It's a really persistent little sucker. And when it pops up, I'm just aware of it, and I can catch it and nip it in the bud quickly. But it just makes me less judgmental, and it's a great freedom, because now one of the greatest things, and I tell people, is that the biggest benefit from being less judgmental on yourself and to practice that, doing that more and more, because then you become less judgmental with other people, is that you have nothing to hide with people. I have nothing to hide, And I always tell people have got so much to hide, or they think they're so embarrassed about certain things. And I think to myself, okay, I've had practice over many years, telling my story, and I've told, I'm very transparent on stage, and I've talked openly about my divorce. I've talked openly about the fact that when I was nearly bankrupt, and I've talked openly about the fact that I've been to prison 3 times. I've got nothing to hide, And I think when you've got nothing to hide, because you recognize that actually there is nothing to hide, because essentially we're all the same, and it's just the ego that tells us, oh shit, don't let those people know about that. Don't tell them that. That's embarrassing. That's when we start putting up all these kind of, these masks, etc. And we learn that through our life. We learn how to be a certain way in certain environments, and then you can't be free. And you're coming back to what you were saying. Thinking is very powerful, because we have this ability to think, which is extremely powerful. But it reminds me of Henry Ford's quote when he said that thinking is the hardest work there is. That's why so few people engage in it. Now, what he was actually saying was that constructive thinking is hard work, because it's easy to be unconscious. It's easy to be an unconscious pilot. And that's what most people are. They unconsciously going through their life. They wake up in the morning, they're just going through the motions. They go to bed at night, wake up the next morning. It's the same day for 75 years. They call it a life. So they're not consciously aware, and they're not consciously creating in their mind, consciously thinking, constructively thinking about certain things, constructively asking questions about what they believe about something. When they get a feeling about something, oh, where did that feeling come from? Why do I feel so angry right now? What triggered that? I wonder what's that linked to? You know what I mean? How can I change that? Rather than blaming the other person for the way they feel, because that's unconscious. So constructive thinking is very powerful, but you've got to be willing to start paying attention to what you're thinking right now at this moment, because you're thinking all the time. We think 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We never ever stop. The unconscious mind is even thinking while we're sleeping. We've got this little antenna above our head. Everyone's got a little antenna above their head, and it's constantly sending and receiving thought. So we got to start paying attention. What am I picking up? What am I thinking? What am I entertaining? Is it constructive? How can I change it? How can I ask better questions? So it's good to think. If you're constructively thinking and you become a conscious, constructive thinker, then you can start consciously creating circumstances. That's when you can start consciously creating success. When you can start consciously manifesting your dreams, because now you are aligning all 3 minds, and the ego becomes your ally, and it's there to serve you and help you. It's not there to hinder you, or to put obstacles in your way, or to remind you how different everyone else is, and to remind you that you shouldn't hang around with those people because they're not intelligent enough, or you shouldn't hang around in that neighborhood because it's not the right neighborhood, or whatever it is, whatever the ego is telling us all the time. And it tells us all kinds of things. And over a period of time, what we've learned as a human, if you look at just look at people now, the population around the world, what are young kids learning now? They're learning, and it's not only young kids, but they're learning that X means Y. And if you have enough X, then you'll have Y, and it's like we think that the circumstance is going to determine the state, or our state is determined by the circumstance. And we forget that really everything is internal. What we're looking for is already internal. And it's about being here right now, being present, and just looking, how can I enjoy this moment right now? How can I be present to this moment right now? How can I remind myself right now of the real truth? What's the truth right now? The truth is I am a powerful, conscious being, a spiritual being that has connection to everything and is connected to this vibrational universe, and when I can just put myself in that place of presence and remind myself that I'm actually love, and that nothing else matters, and it's just, it's a good freedom. It's a real powerful freedom.
So one of the things I think that you said sort of a little while ago, but sort of tying into that, which I think is something that most of us do, and I think society's conditioned us to do it in some way or another, which is to judge. And I've never actually heard it in this way. If you can't judge and love at the same time,
No.
which I think is a really interesting concept, which I completely get. So if people find themselves judging a lot, judging others, judging other situations, whatever else it might be, what's your advice to people that are typically judgmental of others?
Well, we judge everything. We judge, we don't even realize we're doing it. We get on a train and we judge the person sitting next to us. We look at the seat and it's got a tear in it. We judge that. We don't realize we're doing it, but we do it all the time. So what I would say is that just start listening. Just start paying attention. Just start being conscious about what you're thinking about. From the moment you wake up in the morning, just start listening. What do you say to yourself as soon as you wake up? What are you saying to yourself? And if you notice yourself walking down the road and looking at someone and making a judgment about another person, about what they're wearing or how they look or how big they are, then at that moment, you just want to say, that's interesting. I wonder what's causing me to judge that person right now. Where does that come from? What is that reflecting in myself that I may not be willing to accept in myself? Because remember, everything is a mirror. Every relationship is a mirror of the relationship with ourselves. And that universe is a mirror. The universe is a hologram and it's designed to reflect back to us, because we are essentially, the universe is contained within us and all around us. So everything is a reflection and a vibration. And what we want to do is whenever we notice ourselves judging, we're going to ask ourselves, what in myself still needs to be healed that's causing me to project a judgment on this particular person or this event or this circumstance or whatever it is. So if you can develop a habit of doing that, a habit of listening and then noticing, I'm doing it again. And then don't make yourself wrong in that moment. Just say, that's fascinating. I'm doing it again. And remember, it's not you, it's the ego mind that has been trained. So you just say, that's interesting. How fascinating. There it is again. Okay. So in that moment, you can just ask a different question. Say, I wonder what's triggered this judgment. What is it linked to in myself? What is it connected to myself? What is it reflecting back to myself that I need to still heal in myself? Because everything around us, every circumstance, every event is an opportunity for us to have an internal education. So for us what I tell people is it's a spiritual curriculum that we've come to have on this earth. That's my belief. We come here for a spiritual curriculum, and everything that we entertaining, everything that we see, everything that we encounter is what it does is it gives us the opportunity to look at in ourselves, especially if we don't like it, especially if we resist it. In that moment, that's an opportunity for us to go inside and say, right, what am I resisting in myself that's causing me to see that outside? Because that's what it's about, really. And if you can develop that practice over time, then what you'll see is you'll start to gain more control and you'll start being more free of those thoughts and you'll start noticing them. And when you notice them, you can let them go. They don't have to have a negative charge in you. Because a lot of people, what they do is they'll see something and it'll trigger them and they'll judge it. And then they don't realize that there's actually a charge there's a charge connected to that thought. And so it's about recognizing that and noticing it. I'm doing it again. That's interesting. How fascinating. I wonder what I need to see in myself that I'm projecting. I wonder what I need to see in myself that still needs healing. Or I wonder what I'm judging in myself that causes me to judge this, outside of myself. But if you can do that over time, and that's really what it is. It's practice, isn't it?
It is practice. I quite often refer to personal development like cutting an onion. So my personal development journey of sort of the last 10 years or so, I refer to it as like peeling an onion. Like you're taking a layer back, and the more layers you peel, the more you find your eyes water. Like the more I find myself crying and getting emotional and feeling more, and I'm peeling it and peeling it and peeling it, and it seems like these layers I'm constantly forever peeling. Even now, like I'm constantly peeling back the layers. I've got a much more higher level of self-awareness and consciousness than I had definitely 10 years ago, definitely 5 years ago, even a year ago, even a month ago. Like every day, like one of my mantras is I'm living the best day of my life. I'm continually improving, and I'm better tomorrow than I am today, and I'm constantly working through that. I think one of the things that I completely agree with is we project on others. So what we don't like in ourselves, or what I found really interesting probably over the last year, is quite often the things that I judge people on or used to judge people on were two things. They were things that I either actually did, or they were things that I needed to actually be doing. So I go,
yeah,
I don't like that. I'm judging in my head, like, why not don't? Well, no, I need to be doing that. I should actually be doing that. And it was really quite interesting. So now it's like when I'm judging people, I'm like, right, where's this thought coming from? Is this something I do? Is this something I should be doing? Or sometimes it is just a general clash of my values from time to time as well.
Yeah,
which is...
yeah, for sure. And and it's so, you're so right, because it's peeling the onion is such a great analogy. I've used that before. You peel an onion, and then you, it's like when you peel a layer in your own life, when you go to a new understanding or a deeper wisdom or something, and now suddenly things are going well for a while and things are great, and then inevitably before long you encounter another challenge, and you encounter another opportunity to step up to a higher understanding. So it's a continual process. And I always tell people that the only time that you leave this earth is when you've had your time here. There's no accidents. And it's fascinating, because our job here while we're here is just to get out of our own way. I say to people, you are not your body, you're not your hand, you're not your eyes, you're not your name, you're not your vocation. You are far more than that. I'm interested in what's behind the eyes, what's the observer behind the eyes, the I. When you say I, the I, the I am, which is, it's just, if you really want to go deep, is the I am is everything. And we identify too much with our own minds, and we're not our mind. We have access to the mind, but we are not the mind. And we can use the mind to our own benefit, or the mind can use us when it's out of control, when the ego mind's out of control. And ultimately, we want to be happy, we want to be successful, but we are the ones who are standing in our own way, because we're not training ourselves. We're not training ourselves to use the mind effectively, and we're not getting out of our own way, and we are projecting our own fears, we're projecting our own judgments, and we're doing it to ourselves. So if you can, that's why this whole thing, if you look at anyone who's ever taught this stuff, whether it's Bruce Lee or Osho or Tony Robbins or Randy Gage or Wayne Dyer or Marianne Williamson or Oprah, anybody who's passing on sage wisdom, they all tell you the same thing. Life is about self-mastery. Lao Tzu said it 5,000 years ago, long before Jesus Christ said it. And he said the same thing. He said, it's about self-mastery. It's the one who can conquer himself is far more powerful than the one that can conquer armies, because conquering the self is the hardest work there is, because the ego mind is so strong and so well trained, and plus you've got the collective unconscious too, which we don't realize is also affecting the collective, the human race collectively. We've got so much collective unconscious going on. So there's a lot to, it can seem a lot to think about, but really you just want to start where you want to start is, okay, cool. Tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to pay attention to what I'm thinking about and what I'm saying to myself, and I'm going to make it my endeavor. I'm going to commit to stop judging myself, to let myself off the hook a lot quicker, to forgive myself a lot easier, and to love myself a lot more. And then that will start to ripple out into your life, into other areas of your life. It'll ripple out into your business, it'll ripple out to your clients, it'll ripple out to your family. People will notice it, and you'll notice it, and it'll have a massive effect, massive benefit.
Brilliant. So we're sort of just about running out of time. So if there hasn't actually been any questions, which is absolutely amazed me. There's loads of comments on here, Alan, and I'm sure you'll see them when you jump offline. Loads and loads of comments of people taking away loads of value from today, which is brilliant. Lots of people talking about the things you're talking about. This what Elaine Mitchell said was quite funny. She said, we practice taking off our judgy pants in our house. If anyone says anything judgmental in our family, our 9-year-old ASD daughter will stand up and say, that's not nice, take off those judgy pants, judger.
Awesome. Very good.
So yeah, if you have got any questions, then maybe we've got another 5 minutes or so.
Pavan's just asked a question on the chat here. Is it? I think it's pronounced Pavan. It says, "What is the first step that we need to take to drive the ego out of us?" Maybe you don't want to drive it out of you, because the ego has its role and the ego is useful at times. But what you want to do is you want to just make a commitment, or you just want to make the commitment to yourself that you are going to control your ego. You're not going to let your ego control you, because when the ego controls you, then it just runs amok. And then what happens is it's out of control. But if you make a commitment that you're going to start to pay attention to how your ego sabotages your success, or how your ego gets in the way of your relationships, or your ego gets in the way of your happiness, or gets in the way of your self-expression, or gets in the way of your ability to take action, just start paying attention to how the ego shows up in your life, how the ego shows up in your activity. And then when you notice it, then you just say to yourself, oh, this is interesting. How does this stop me in other areas of my life? How is the ego out of control in other areas of my life? And remember, a great acronym for the ego, I heard this a long time ago and I've used it myself. Ego essentially means edging God out. And when I talk about God, I don't mean God as somebody who sits on a throne with a big white beard. I'm talking about God as in good, orderly direction, which is the universe. The universe always flows in good, orderly direction. It's constantly expanding, and there are no mistakes in the universe. And we forget just the magic of the universe. If you just go out into the night tonight, if it's a clear sky where you are, look up at the stars, and you just really just take a moment to get present to those stars above you, you'll be blown away. So the universe is magical, it unfolds perfectly, there is no accident. But as soon as we think that we are doing this on our own and that we are separate from everything else, then that's when the ego is in control. And then the ego, what it will do is it'll get in your way. It'll get in the way of your relationships, get in the way of your expression, get in the way of your willingness to take action. So just start paying attention and ask yourself, where's the ego running my life? Where's my ego in control? And how can I start to notice that? And how can I start taking action and to start managing that in a much more powerful way?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pavan. I'm just going to check here. So maybe you've got time for one more question. So
sure.
If we get one more question, if anybody has got another question, what's Louise said? Here we go. So Louise Rowland has asked, Allan, do you set goals or intentions for the future? If so, how do you go about being fully present and thinking about your future?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, I do set goals, and yes, I do set intentions. I've got a big vision board on the wall. So I know what I want to do in the future. I know what the kinds of things that I want to experience. I know the kinds of things that I would like to achieve and accomplish. But then also, what I also know is that the universe also has its own plan too. And I know that at a higher level of consciousness, we all have a higher self or a higher level of consciousness that is also operating. And sometimes when we get stuck in this earth level and in our head and in our ego mind, then we forget that there's a higher level of consciousness also unfolding in our own lives too. In other words, our soul knows exactly where it wants to go and why it's come here. So and the reason I'm telling you that is because when people set goals and they have a set plan and they know exactly how they want something to work out and they're very specific, and I hear people saying this all the time, when you set goals, make sure it's very specific. You want this, you want that, and that's great. It's good to have specifics. However, you must also realize that sometimes you'll be pushed in a different direction, and sometimes you might end up where you wanted to be, but you got there from a completely different direction. That's because the universe decided to take you a different direction, or something happened. Or what you want to do is you want to set goals, but you also want to be open to providence and unexpected surprises. I'd put it like that. So yeah, good to have intentions, good to have goals, and at the same time also recognize that there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different routes to get somewhere, and be open to unexpected surprises and the universe supporting you. Because when you have a plan that's set in stone, then what you're doing is, if anything shows up, and I've had this experience with many people I know, and some of my clients, something shows up and they say, well, that's not the way I want to do it. I want to do it this way. But they don't realize that what showed up maybe was a gift from the universe or a gift from providence. And when you shut that down, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to do it my way, but your way that's from your mind. That's from your limited thinking process. So be open, have intentions, have goals, but also be open to, having unexpected surprises and unexpected help.
Fantastic. So, are you happy with one more bonus question?
For sure, bro. For sure.
This is a really good one, actually, that Ellis has just asked. Because again, and you've seen it, I've seen it a thousand times over, of people that go to personal development events, they go to Tony's events, they go to whoever's event it might be, they get pumped up, they come on webinars like this, they get pumped up like, yes, that makes so much sense. I get that. I'm going to be present. I'm going to train my ego. I'm feeling great, and they're feeling pumped right now, which I guarantee the people that have been on this call have been, because the value and the content you provided has been phenomenal, which I knew it was going to be, Alan. So thank you very much for that. Alice has asked, what's the best advice you can give about keeping up to continue this process? Because people no doubt feel pumped and incredibly inspired by what you've said, which I agree, but then things will happen and then the ego kicks in, and people start giving up. So what's your advice to help people sort of continue to do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. And you know, I've had the same thing throughout my journey too. There's been lots of times when I've also been on the brink of giving up, and there's been times in the past, you know, when I haven't done my practice regularly, etc. But in that moment, you could have two options in that moment. What most people do is they'll give themselves a hard time. They say, "Oh shit, you know, I haven't done it," and in the back of their mind, they'll be beating themselves up. When you notice you've given up, just say, "Oh, you know what? I gave up. Time to start again," and start right there in that moment. And then it doesn't matter, because then it doesn't matter that you've given up. But if you can develop that habit, oh, okay, oh my God, I haven't done my practice for 2 days. Oh, I've been out of control for a few days. Okay, cool. Oh, let me start right now again. And then also, you know, have a reminder on your phone. Put reminders wherever you can see them. Put them on the wall. You know, support yourself. Put something on the mirror. So I've got things on the mirror in my bathroom. So when I walk into the mirror, when I walk into the bathroom to brush my teeth, there's things on the mirror and it reminds me. And then while I'm brushing my teeth, I'm reading it and I'm thinking about it. You know, I've got things next to my bed. You know, I've got lots of little reminders. I've got something on my phone here, my home page. You can't see it now. Okay, you can probably, I don't know if you can see that, but
yeah,
on my what do you call it when your home screen, right? When your phone's locked. On my home screen, I've got the prayer from Saint Assisi, which reminds me that my focus must be on forgiveness, love, being present, and not on judgment and making people wrong or making myself wrong. Because so if you feel like you've given up, then you say, oh my gosh, I've forgotten. I haven't done my affirmations. I haven't done my meditation. I haven't done my practice. Okay, good. Let me start right now again, and just forget about the fact that you didn't do it for a week or whatever. You gave up. Just get back on it straight away. Just keep getting back on it. When you keep getting back on it, then eventually what happens is you'll stay on it.
It's interesting. You just touched on something that I'll add in as a little something as well, which was really powerful for me. So you mentioned the St. Francis prayer and forgiveness, and on the judging aspect, I've in the past been particularly judgmental of others. Again, it was a reflection of me projecting certain things out on other people, because really what I was doing was judging myself. And one of the things that I did to be able to stop judging others was to forgive myself. Because if you look at the last 4 letters of forgive, it's give. If you look at the last 3 letters of forget, it's get. And people tend to forget stuff rather than forgive stuff. But when you forget something, you get it, you've got it. Whereas when you forgive something, you're giving it up, you're letting go of it. It's no longer something that you're holding on to, so it can't affect you. And for me, forgiving myself and forgiving others stopped me, or particularly myself, stopped me starting to judge others, which for me was that sign of what is it that I don't like in that? Well, it's something that I do or I've done. Well, there's nothing I can do about the past except change the way they think about it. Forgiving was something that I was able to do, is forgive myself.
Yes.
For certain things, which has been particularly powerful for me as well.
Yeah, no, very powerful, man. I agree with you. Forgiving myself, it took many years, man. I just, yeah, and I'm still doing that, you know. Even now, still, I think, you know, it's something I still practice, you know, because it's important, man. It's very important.
Well, look, Alan, I just want to say a huge thank you. And if we can all, for those of you that are still sitting here watching this right now, if you're watching the replay, give Alan a round of applause.
Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic. Everybody's clapping at home and you can feel the vibrations coming through.
Thank you.
I'm really grateful. There's been so much value that's been provided on this. And I know we were having the conversation at the weekend on the phone, and we're going to get you to come and speak at Elite Network. We've just got to work out what the right location is, and the team are going to be in contact with you to get that sorted, which phenomenal. So you have to come and see Allan speak because he truly is phenomenal. But before we go, obviously some people will be connecting with you for the very first time tonight. So for those of you that have connected with you, which I'm sure you've connected with many people, how can they find out about you? How can they stay connected with you? How can they find out more about what it is that you do?
Oh, thanks, Will. First of all, thank you for that virtual applause there from everyone, and thanks for having me here. It's been great. I know it's a very short time to cover such a in-depth topic, really. But I hope that everyone got value. And if people want to stay connected with me, they can find me on Facebook. You know, my name is Allan and Kleynhans, Kleynhans. I think you've got it on the. I mean, you put it on the Facebook post, didn't you? So they can connect with me on Facebook. I've got a page as well as a personal profile. So my page, I'm often putting stuff on my page, you know, free. I do lives and I do free content. And obviously I'm going to see you next week, am I, at the UPW?
I'm not at UPW, unfortunately, this now. But
and are you coming to London Yes Group on the week after?
We've got the Elite Network Chelmsford that day.
Oh, have you? Okay.
I'm just trying to find your page now. I'm going to share your page into the group. Is it just under Allan Kleynhans?
Yeah. If you see, if you type in my name, it should come up with my profile and my page. You'll see my page.
I can find the page and I can share that into the group now. There we go. Yeah, I got it. So let me. Allan Speaks. That's the one, isn't it?
Yes, Allan Speaks. Yeah, that's it.
Post this in here for you now. And then, are there any other platforms that people can get connected with you?
Yeah, I've got a website, allanspeaks.com, but it's currently being rebuilt. But I mean, they're welcome to connect with me there when it's rebuilt. I'm on Instagram, but Instagram, I'm fairly new on Instagram. I only started using it, I think, at the beginning of last year, really, where other people have been on it for years. But I'm having fun with it. But I think Facebook is probably the platform where I spend most time in terms of my page, and it's where I tell people about what I'm doing and that. Yeah.
What's your Instagram handle?
Allan Kleynhans, my name.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And yeah.
In the group as well.
I'm obviously also on LinkedIn, but I'm not very active there, and I'm on Twitter, but I haven't used Twitter for ages. I don't know. Do people still use Twitter? Because I don't know. I haven't used it for a long time.
Personally, don't. But I've got a Twitter. It still exists, and some stuff goes out on it. But it's not something I'm active on. I mean, there's so many platforms these days, isn't there? So, well, Allan, I just want to say once again, on behalf of everybody that can't speak right now, but lots of people are messaging in the Facebook community, which you see already, saying thank you. But yeah, just thank you again on behalf of everybody and sharing your time and your wisdom with us all tonight. I'm really, really grateful.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me, my buddy. And good to see you again here online. And I look forward to seeing you some point in the future. And what I'll do is tomorrow morning I'll get onto that post and I'll have a look at any of the comments in there, if there's any questions there, and just say thank you on the post there tomorrow.
Perfect. Top man. Well, look, have a great evening. Everybody else, look forward to seeing you soon. Until next time, make it happen.
Cheers, Will.